Last, here we go again.
Nothing is decided here.
I don't know anything.
Nobody knows anything.
What we need is knowledge.
Who do you think you're talking to?
Forgive me, most rudely. I am
Pull to open.
Pull to open.
Yes, and what do you do?
Sit down.
It descended from the heavens.
Not the heavens!
It's hardly surprising that an audible thing.
Done it all our lives.
First things first, but not necessarily in that order.
Come here, the drums!
Hello and welcome to Pull to Open. My name is Chris Taylor. This is a very, very random podcast through all of time and space, through all of Doctor Who in entirely random order. And I'm here with...
Pete Paschal, and this is me.
We like to do this live. We like to switch it up. Anyway.
Lots of things are happening in a random order today.
That's right.
Among them, this is the point where I usually explain that Chris and I are a couple of journalists and Doctor Who fans, and we are blessed to bring you fresh and random Doctor Who commentary every week. But there's something that you, dear listener, you don't know. What don't they know, Chris?
This time, there's three of us.
That's right. This week on the podcast, we are pleased to welcome none other than Mark Cockram, pew, 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 aka the Human Palindrome. He is from the All of Time and Space podcast. Hello, Mark.
Hello. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
And thank you for increasing the Brit to American ratio, 2 to 1.
We can change the odds around a little.
I'm also being outflanked in terms of time zones. I'm here in Eastern Time, New York. Chris, you're there in San Francisco.
I'm on Pacific time.
And Mark, where are you?
Summertime.
You're what?
The British summertime.
Summertime.
Which is what it always is in my heart. So there, I'm kind of on it as well.
So tell us all about what's going on at the All of Time and Space podcast, Mark. I actually was listening to your most recent episode on the Enemy of the World, and I didn't get too far into it because honestly, I've never seen Enemy of the World, and we haven't done it for the podcast yet. But there was a lot of learned commentary there. Anyway, just tell us a little bit of background, maybe of the podcast and where you're at.
Sure. Okay. Well, back in if you can take your minds back to the year 2020. It was quite a tumultuous year, and with the way the world was going, it forced me to just reevaluate some of my life choices. And the thing that struck me, as I'm sure it would to most sane people, was, my God, I haven't watched Doctor Who in broadcast order. I must do that. So I've been podcasting for a while, and I figured I'll get my old mate Ian Martin to come along and help out. So myself and
Ian Martyr?
Yeah, no, that was a joke I used to do on the old Blue Box podcast when he used to write in as a listener. Yeah. So Ian Martin is my
got it.
Co-host. And we have a guest each time. So we like to mix it up a bit. So it just keeps it fresh. So we're watching all of Doctor Who in broadcast order. So we're taking the long way around compared to you guys. You guys are thinking about all over.
And where are you up to?
Well, that very much depends on the where you're looking at. It's very timey-wimey. So in terms of what the listeners are hearing at the moment, we just dropped our episode on the Web of Fear.
Oh,
okay.
It's with a gentleman called Toby Haydock. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Oh, yes. I love Toby's writings.
Yeah, he's a lovely guy. So, we've just done that one, and we just started recording season 6. So we like to record a little bit ahead of time. As we were discussing before the pod started, I'm a bit of a control freak. So I like.
Oh, wow. So do you do a bunch back to back?
Yeah, we try.
Wow. That's smart.
But
Chris, we got to get in on that.
Yeah. Let's.
When I don't actually do anything, and then I suddenly start thinking, really must get around to doing some editing.
Let's record all Sunday, and then we'll just take 7 weeks off.
Oh my gosh.
I'm down with that.
I was asked to go on. I don't know if you're aware of the podcast. It's called Hamster with a Blunt Penknife, and it's hosted by a lovely gentleman called Joe Ford. And my goodness, we watched The Horns of Nymon. So it was like an all-dayer. It really was.
Well,
It would be.
we're not here to make you watch the Horns of Daimon, but we are here to welcome you on our random adventure. And what a random adventure it has been. Just to give you the recap, previously on Pull to Open, as all listeners surely know, 4 stories ago, we were in Season 18. I'm here in my Season 18 scarf. In Tom Baker's last season, Tom Baker being very, very exhausted and looking very unwell, but still blasting through the deciders in full circle. 3 stories ago, we went back to my home area of England for the Time Meddler, just as I did. 2 stories ago, we saw a certain school teacher named Barbara involved in a certain thing called human sacrifice that she was trying to prevent in the Aztecs. And
could be some foreshadowing here, I feel like.
What random connection could there be? But last time we had to pause before the randomizer dropped the mic on us for a message from your local Kablam delivery guy who suddenly appeared in our TARDIS, and we had to dispense with that. He quite likes Kablam, don't you?
I liked it so much, I put an exclamation point after my rating, my Dalek rating.
That's right. And from Kablam, exclamation point, we went to Season 18, Meglos, exclamation point, which we decided it does have now. It's a musical. I don't know if you knew
That's
that.
right.
He does give that delivery occasionally when he...
Well, as we observed last week, we went from the one Doctor Who story with an exclamation point in the title to the one in the classic series that most deserves one.
Yeah, you don't... unless, like, if this is a success, I think we need a follow-up musical just called Legopolis! And have lots of sad songs that say so much. Anyway.
So before we start, listener, if you want to cut right away to our commentary on Meglos, check the show notes for the exact time to fast forward to. That's right. It's going to be right there in the show notes, whatever podcast app you're on.
That's right.
If you're the commentary, it's there. If you're on YouTube, just look under the video. There's some notes there too.
And
right
if you are a cactus listening to this, I'm sure many cacti are, just get your human servant to do it for you. Just bang on the desk a few times until they do exactly what you want. But anyway, you will not want to do that, everything that Pete just said, because we've got a new Whomoji challenge, and I actually have a contender for the Whomoji challenge for once. Thank you for joining that, Mark. And we got our YouTube comment of the week. We're going to find out what listeners thought of the Aztecs in our poll to open feature. The comment of the week on Kablam that I'm just looking at in the show notes, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Something hidden in plain sight. Okay, anyway,
that's right.
That's all coming up.
Hidden in plain sight.
It's all coming up.
What's it? One game is on point.
Yes. What were you going to say, Pete? Is it the pulse
is it all coming up in the pulse loop, Chris?
I think it's all coming up in the pulse loop, Pete. But first, let's pause this for a message from our advertiser, which is Pull to Open. Listeners, one of the best ways to show your support for this show is to do exactly what our guest of the week did and leave a review for this podcast. Did you rate us 5 stars, Mark?
I did.
Was that your recommendation?
Slightly churlish to give you something less than 5 if you had the good grace to invite me on.
That's very sweet of you. Thank you so much. And it might be churlish of you, listener, to do exactly that. But if you want to, it's a free country. Especially if you're listening to Apple Podcasts, because we like to get more visibility for this show. And if you want to share it with a friend, that's cool too. Share it with a random friend, randomize your way through your address book. Send this exact show with these exact people at this exact time, because who doesn't spend most of their days thinking about Meglos?
And guys, if you leave a review, it doesn't take much. All you need to do is fire up that app, go ahead and start typing it in, and really just leave one character. Leave an emoji. Go ahead. In fact, why don't you, while you're doing that, leave a Doctor Who story title in the form of an emoji, because we love to get those. And we could use a few more of those as fuel for our next segment, the Whomoji Challenge.
Oh, yes. We need fuel for this.
And this week, we have 2 contestants on the Whomoji Challenge, where our contestants will try to guess the Doctor Who story by having emojis described to them. And the winner gets lots of respect.
That's right. No, the winner gets an extra secret Doctor Who emoji added to their phone. I don't make the rules.
Oh,
it just happens.
Hey.
I can't talk
Good
about
stuff.
I can't talk about all my wins, but
Chris,
anyway.
How are you feeling about having a co-contestant this week?
I am so glad for someone else to win that I'm barely going to try this week. Barely going to try. Only if Mark is floundering shall I save him.
Well, that could still happen.
Well, I've
Mark,
got my
I think you've
lifeguard
heard,
skills.
Yeah, you've heard the podcast. You know how this goes, right?
I do.
Okay, so then we're just going to get right into it and just shout out once I've completed it what you think the emoji thing is, and we'll go back and forth. So you go ahead, Mark, as our guest. You can get the first guess.
Okay.
And then you can maybe steal it, Chris.
Yeah, but feel free to buzz in anyway if you have a buzzer handy. We really need to get buzzers installed for this thing. Anyway, go ahead, Pete.
All right, here we go, guys. It's 3 emojis. First emoji. Green Chinese dragon head. Second emoji. Cold face. With like, icicles on the teeth and stuff like that.
Okay.
Buzz.
He's going to get it on 2! He's going to get it on 2!
I'm going to go out on a limb here and suggest the Mind of Evil.
Big X on the screen.
Oh, thank goodness. That's what I was going to guess.
Wow, you buzzed in before we even had all 3 emojis in. That's a brave one, Mark. I gotta say, you're really grabbing a hold of this emoji challenge.
Who even knew this was in the rules of the unwritten rules of the emoji challenge? All right.
Okay, third emoji. Fire.
Dragonfire?
It's Dragonfire!
Oh, Mark, I'm so sorry. Wait, were there more emojis? Did I buzz in without buzzing? Oh,
no, that was it. Dragon.
That was a cold
face
on my part.
Fire.
Very cool.
You would have got it, I think, if you had all 3 and had a minute to think about it.
I still, after the third emoji, would have guessed Mind of Evil first because we've been there recently. It's the first Chinese dragon I think of.
All right. Well, Chris, you retain the title of our reigning champion here at the Whomoji Challenge. Mark, you're going to go home with a copy of our home game, so that's all right.
But please come back and take this title off me, please. The curse.
By the way, that Whomoji Challenge was from a longtime friend of the pod, Bob Gilby, who gave us a whole batch a while back. Thank you, Bob. Woo-hoo. You too can be like Bob and go ahead. Leave us some more emojis anywhere you can find Pull to Open, whether that's on the many social networks where we're Pull to Open 63, or TikTok where we're Pull to Open, or YouTube, youtube.com/Pull to Open. All those places are great places to leave comments and emojis.
Yes, indeed. And one place you can interact even more with Pull to Open, dear listeners, is Spotify. If you're on Spotify, you can also pull up from the bottom and you'll find the poll to open. The poll to open on this particular episode. It will be on Meglos! But we have some results for you from the past polls. By the way, we keep these polls open, so if you don't like these results, and I think we're in a very special situation here where you might not like these results, you can go and change them because we have some results from the Aztecs here where it is a dead heat, ladies and gentlemen. It is Florida 2000. It is Wisconsin 2016. It is knife edge.
Yep.
It's England 2010. How about that for UK reference? Knife edge hung parliament between the Viscount Banger and the Dalek.
That's right.
Just like we were.
It's basically a dead heat.
Yes.
Is it one of the best ever, or is it just really, really good? Maybe we need someone to break this tie, and it might
Hey, Mark,
be
are you on
guest.
Spotify? Are you on Spotify?
I tend to listen through Apple Podcasts.
Oh, okay.
I hear that.
If you were on Spotify, what would your vote be here? We need a tiebreaker.
I would give it. I think I'd give it a Viscount banger.
Oh,
Yeah.
look at that.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Sorry.
All right, Chris, you're edging it out just a little bit here. So when that poll reopens, unfortunately, there's been some technical difficulties on Spotify lately where some of our polls are closing early. We want to keep them open more or less indefinitely. But anyway, when it reopens, Mark, be sure to vote in this one because it's at a shorter than usual window.
Straight onto Spotify, create an account.
That's right. That's right. Listeners, just pause Meglos. Come back to Meglos. He'll always be here. Pause Meglos. Go to the Aztecs podcast. Vote now and vote often. Thank you.
Do it. Okay. Also, visit us, as I said before, at youtube.com/poll-to-open, because again, that's a great place to leave a comment. You can see these fun Easter eggs in the background. My Dom Baker poster. It's up from City of Death, so pretty close. Pretty close. Pretty close to season 18.
Yeah, season 17, season 18. What's the diff? Actually, quite a lot.
The Golden Age. Season 7.
And if you are watching on YouTube, here's a reminder to like the video you're watching. Please subscribe to the channel, and there is that bell icon. That's pretty handy if you like notifications for whenever we post something new, which is fairly often, but not so often that you'd be bothered by it. So go and do it. Also, leaving those comments is great because you get to be featured as our YouTube comment of the week, perhaps. And we have one here today from none other than YouTuber Bob6, great name. And he is commenting on our Kablam podcast. So, Bob says, so I don't remember the episode, but I believe it is after Matt Smith wakes up after the Big Bang. He checks himself for his bow tie and his fez and realizes he's missing the fez.
Oh, no.
He then says he can always buy one. And it's like, I completely forgot about this. It's true. I checked it out. Yes, he does that. He says he's going to buy one, which of course completes the loop on Kerblam. That's exactly why she gets the box. It's like,
but when does he actually order it? And is Kerblam really that far behind that it takes you 2 regenerations to get your delivery? That's
there's no indication that Kerblam is time travel, right? So presumably, like, who knows? Like, yes, there's all the you could come back 10 minutes before you left, but this is the other side of that. It could also have come centuries after you order it.
Yeah, he elected to go for the budget postage and just decided to let it take a little bit longer.
I like the idea that they'll just send you a photo of, like, we left it in 1786. Like, here, by this shed in France. Good luck. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I didn't think of that. That's quite amazing. But, sorry to denigrate Kerblam or suggest that its deliveries might be in any way late. That is the worst sin of today's delivery culture.
Yeah, if you work for Kerblam, feel free to give us a call for sponsorships, guys. We're into that. But thank you, Bob, for commenting. That was a great comment of the week. And guys, hey, there's other places you can find us. What's one of them, Chris?
One of them is TikTok, which is what we know you're doing, dear listener, instead of your work at your Kerblam warehouse. You're looking at TikToks, and we're there. Go look at us. We've got thousands and thousands of followers. Videos are flowing. The spice must flow, and it flows in those videos. So follow us there and enjoy watching the new Who fans of TikTok learn about classic Who for the first time. We're teaching them kids a thing or two. So...
I feel like we got to balance our Kerblam references with some Meglos references, just because this is the Meglos podcast. So, guys, if you're done macheting through all the hostile plant life around you, you might want to check out our feeds on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Threads. We're at Pull2Open63, and we're also on Blue Sky. Yes, Blue Sky, which might be above a big desert planet with nothing else on it than screens. Blue Sky, we are at Pull2Open, no 63.
All right. Well, it's time. It is that time. As Pete's screen goes dark and red, it is time. Other podcasts might, when they take you to Meglos, spend the entire damn podcast recapping Meglos. No, we do not do this. What we do is we allot 30 seconds per Classic Who episode. So 2 minutes for Meglos, although I might argue in a minute that that's over generous. To one of our contestants, and that contestant this week is Mr. Pete Paschal. How are you feeling about summarizing Meglos in 2 minutes?
Pretty damn unsure. Not sure how this one's going to go. I watched it over 4 nights with my daughter, and I'll confess, some of those nights I was a little sleepy.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Worse for wear. Yeah.
We'll see what happens. If
you were feeling
fuzzy, I'll just throw some. I'll say there was a cactus.
Exactly.
And that's it.
You probably remember as much about it as Tom Baker does at this point, so or even the morning after. Yeah. So, but I got to say, there are weeks where I'm like, oh, I'm glad I get to do the TLDW, and the weeks where I'm like, oh, I don't get to do the TLDW for this one. This one, I am down on my knees praying, thanking the randomizer. I do not have to summarize Meglos because holy hell, what happened? Well, here's Pete to tell us what happened, and no pressure, Pete, but the entire rest of the podcast depends on what you do in the next 2 minutes.
No problem.
Are you ready, sir? Are you ready?
Yeah, sure. Can I send out my cactus clone right now and blame it all on him if it all goes wrong?
You could try bribing Mark with a dodecahedron.
Ooh.
Oh, I love
I might have a 12-sided die around here.
Mark, do you want to sub in? Do you want to take this?
I'm happy to let Pete go ahead. Being a journalist,
I wouldn't
away with words.
Yeah, do not take the glory away from him. Yeah,
I wouldn't want to diminish Pete's moment of glory.
You're most generous. Okay.
All right, the official pull to open summary of Meglos begins in 2 minutes. Begins in 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, so there's this star system called the Prion system. There's these 2 planets, Tagella and Zolfathura. Tagella is dependent on this power source, this dodecahedron. It's like basically a power artifact, but it's malfunctioning. And so they send for the Doctor, who's their friend, and the Doctor sort of arrives in the system. But who on Zolfathura is there? It's only one person. It's called Meglos, and he's sort of a cactus, and he traps the Doctor in this sort of time loop while also summons these mercenaries to bring him an Earthling so he can basically inhabit the Earthling and duplicate the Doctor. He goes to Tagella with these mercenaries and pretends to be the Doctor and sort of plays the religious people against the scientific people who are sort of these 2 factions, and ends up stealing the dodecahedron by shrinking it and essentially putting it in his pocket. The Doctor and Romana and K9 get out of the time loop by basically doing the events of the time loop before they loop back, and that somehow confuses the time loop, so they get to Tagella, and then they get there just as Meglos is leaving, and the Doctor gets blamed for stealing the dodecahedron, even though he never got there. Romana gets captured almost by these. Well, she gets captured by the mercenary guys, and but sort of outsmarts them and gets away. But then Meglos leaves with the dodecahedron, goes back to Zolfathura, puts it in the middle of these screens in the middle of the desert, which is actually a base for a super weapon. And the super weapon, he's about to destroy Tagella, but the Doctor comes back, impersonates Meglos. They both get thrown in prison, and then because the mercenary guys have tried to take over, and then the Doctor has had time to reconfigure it so that it's going to destroy back on itself, and so they bust out and they run back to the TARDIS, and then everything starts to go wrong with the base, and those guys can't get out in time. Meglos tries to run and stop it, goes back into his cactus form, but they can't do anything about it, and the whole place blows up. The Doctor takes the Earthling, who has been freed from Meglos, back home, and the Tagellans now have to live on the surface of their planet because the dodecahedron's gone, and it was powering their whole underground society.
Time! Oh my God! Glory to Pete Paschal for the best summary of Meglos I've ever heard.
That was incredible. That was almost
amazing.
Better than Meglos itself.
It really was. I mean, this proves.
Mark, can you come back every week? Because that might have been the best I think I've ever done at TLDW. Usually I'm over by at least 5 seconds.
Yeah, what I really appreciate is you left so much time for that the final 5 minutes that you actually made them less confusing.
Yeah.
Than what they were on screen. Like I didn't know what happened to Tagella after all of that. I like you blink and you miss whatever the hell is going on there, whether the dodecahedron's returned or who even knows.
So
that was masterful.
Thank you. I feel like I should have a statuette or something.
Yeah. Speech.
Hand me some flowers.
Your family,
Speech.
and God, and
You know what? But the thing is, I'm also hard on myself because I knew as I was doing it, every time you do TLDW, you have to leave stuff out, obviously.
Mm.
But I did not get enough. I didn't say enough about Lexa. And
That's right. That's right. And we should pause and say that, listeners, if you're listening with an Amazon device in the room or a Kablam device in the room, you might want to mute it because we're going to be saying the word Lexa a lot. Go ahead, sir.
Indeed. Yeah. So Lexa, I feel like, I mean, it's obviously Jacqueline Hill who played Barbara, and this is her coming back to the show, sort of coming home. It's the first time she's back. It's the first time any companion has come back in any role other than their companion role.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like to the extent that Meglos is trying to say anything about anything, it's kind of using Jackie Hill and her role in this sort of religion versus science thing as a bit of a backdrop. It ends up being more of a backdrop than a theme. But she's great in it. I love her costume. Her wig is like to die for. She's got this great white wig.
Hair choices going on in this story.
Yeah. So I feel like she's a big part of it that I unfortunately left out because I just wanted to cut to the Doctor.
You got to leave something for me and Chris to talk about after you've done your.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, exactly. Leave some on the field, sir. Yes, you did fail to mention also Ty, which means that Mark and I must now. We must now ritually sacrifice you. I'm sorry, we don't make the rules, but if you just lay back with a silk cushion and await.
Yeah, what's that big stone?
Food had got so far out into the universe, I didn't realize there were such fans of it. You know.
Yes, we'll certainly. In the question of whether the evil plot had succeeded, which we'll be talking about at the end of the podcast, we definitely have to discuss whether a Time Lord would regenerate if a stone that size goes splat all over your skeletal
Not much
structure.
left.
Exactly. Yeah. What happens then? You sort of slink away like Meglos does in this.
Maybe he just regenerates into a pizza. And then it's just, he becomes different toppings every time he regenerates after that.
Well, I want to bring Mark in front and said because as alert listeners know from last week, Mark, you specifically requested season 17.
I did.
And here we are in season 18, which in the last sort of JNT episode, like it's not entirely sure who's at the wheel for Meglos. There are a lot of cooks, but apparently no one was in the kitchen. What did you? Are you now cursing yourself for making that request and having the randomizer?
I think the randomizer is teaching me to just mind my own business and shut the hell up and let it choose what it wants.
Oh yes.
But that said, this is probably the most season 17 story in season 18. If I had to, look at the general feel of the story, definitely. As a kid watching, so I started with season 17, and then season 18 was the first one I watched all the stories for. Yes. So obviously I was blown away because it was so new and shiny and sparkly. You had this new.
I'm in exactly the same boat. Yes,
exactly.
I didn't watch all of 17, but what I watched I loved, and then 18 was like, right, I'm there for the leisure hive. What's this new theme tune?
All change. You know, you got this brand new costume for the Doctor, and so at the time, as a kid, I loved it. I thought it was really exciting. However, being an older gentleman now, which I must admit, I'm surprised, Chris, to hear you say that you were watching around the same time as me, because you've obviously worn much better than me. You obviously didn't have such a tough paper round. Maybe I don't know. But
I'm sure you fought in a time war or two.
Yeah. Well, looking back now, I mean, there are things to like about season 18, but I don't love it in the same way I do season 17. It just feels a bit. They sucked a lot of the fun out of it. I know that was kind of the MO of JNT. But,
well, it was more the MO of Christopher H. Bidmead, really.
Yeah.
I think having read back on what Bidmead says about Meglos, which Doctor Who magazine did interview with him years ago, and they sort of take him through everything in season 18.
Yeah.
And with Meglos, his first comment is, "Oh, people didn't like that, did they?"
Oh,
something like that. oh, you didn't like what I gave you with
Is he
these
just playing dumb?
undead
Yeah.
Maybe
I
he's
don't know.
sincere.
But we will get to
Hamill's
talk.
He doesn't like fun.
We get to talk about
Yeah.
what he inserted and what he removed. But he also, you're absolutely right that he doesn't like fun. And what stuck in my head from that interview is he criticizes Rose. He criticizes the Doctor and Rose for saying lots of planets have a north. And he doesn't get why that's funny. And I'm like, you are way too literal minded, man. You're like, you're stopped and thinking about planets having a north and all that. But
yeah, well, it's interesting because like Meglos looks like it should be a lot more fun, right? Like there's so much. It's like honestly, like on paper or not on paper, like looking at this episode, it's just totally bonkers.
Yeah.
Like there's a cactus that takes over bodies. It can shapeshift, and then there's this time loop thing, and it's like they get out of it by repeating the time. Like it's just kind of weird and dumb.
Thank you for saying there's a time loop thing and not a chronic hysteresis, which is a term that Bidmead came up with, which I add to the legion of data showing that he has no fun.
But it is a very entertaining blog written by Stephen Shapansky from Radio Free Skaro.
Oh, yes?
Oh.
Yeah.
You got to have him on the pod.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
My goodness, terrible choice of words. Anyway, we'll get to that.
But then, of course, like not only is this society worshiping like essentially a giant Dungeons and Dragons die, but it's also you have that the image that everyone knows from Meglos, which is of course Tom Baker, all the bumps on his hands and his face, and he's Mr. Meglos, like the visuals on this thing are kind of nuts. It's also like for a little behind the scenes notes that it's the first time they used this sort of special effect technique that you can really tell with the miniaturized screens and stuff on the planet of Zolfathura.
Which, near as I can tell, is basically a motion camera in its infancy.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is computer controlled. It's supposed to mimic what the main camera's doing.
But given that Star Wars did it 3 years earlier with proper motion control cameras,
Star Wars has got a budget of $50 gazillion, whereas Doctor Who's got 10 pence.
But the original Star Wars had a low budget, and George Lucas had to build it out of bits of string in a Van Nuys warehouse. Anyway, but we won't get sucked into Star Wars today, sir. No, sir. Even though there is a very Death Star-like end to this thing with what planet shall we destroy today? But yeah, it felt to me to this point of like it feels like it had the fun sucked out. It felt like it could have been a good Douglas Adams story. Speaking of season 17, it has so much weird Douglas Adams-ness to it. The cactus feels very Douglas. The dodecahedron, repeating a word like dodecahedron, which Douglas Adams would have loved. He loved the sound of language, and his word Golgafrinchen sounds very much like, what is it, Zolta? I can't think of the two names. Zolfathuran, so it feels like a lot that Adams would have to conjure with, but like they've sucked not only the humor out of it, but also the sense, the explanations, which Adams was always overly into explaining things, which is desperately what this needed. Like, who was the Earthman?
Yeah. Well, who is Meglos?
Who is Meglos? Why
he
is he
says he's the last Zolfathuran, but he's like, is he a cactus? Is he a blob? Is he some wavelength of light, which I think the Doctor says at one point? And what's his deal? Like, why is he so intense? And why is he alone? And how long has he been alone? And what's I know he wants to sort of take over the cosmos, I guess, by having the dodecahedron turn it into the super weapon. But like, why? What's your plan? Like, what's your end game here, dude?
This may be the Doctor Who story with the most questions per minute, which is a little weird because it's also famous for not having a lot of minutes, right? It's one of the most padded episodes ever, just below the Leisure Hive, apparently, which is pretty padded as well. I don't remember. We'll get there when we get there.
Preceding story.
It was indeed. So obviously there was a lot of padding going on while we waited for JNT to take the reins. As he probably does in Full Circle, which we've also been to, which is the next story.
So, Mark, had you seen this one? I know you said you grew up on this era. Had you seen it since then, prior to watching for the podcast?
Yeah. So I collect some bits and bobs of paraphernalia. I went crazy with the action figures when they first came out because, as a kid, all I wanted was a Doctor Who action figure, and then there were tons of them.
Yeah.
And then I kind of got to the point where I'm like, I've got way too much tat. But the one thing I have always kept up with is the DVD and Blu-ray releases. So I would have bought it on DVD,
Nice.
and now, of course, we have the beautiful season 18 Blu-ray box
Wow.
set.
So
Indeed.
you bought Meglos twice
Yes, it's a commitment.
for the price of many dodecahedrons.
Yeah.
Yes. So where should we go from here? Like, there's so many things to talk about. Where do we start? Mark, was there anything that jumped out at you this time on this rewatch that you hadn't noticed before?
I'm not sure about hadn't noticed before, but I felt like there's an attempt at world building here. So you have the science-based guys with the beautiful wigs, and then you have the
What is up with those wigs?
religious guys. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So yeah, there's that sort of juxtaposition of technology and religion, and
Did it feel very 80s music video to you a bit? Like you'd see some new romantic
I'm guessing
band.
the switch, that was another switch that we had in season 18, is that we went completely over to the radiophonic workshop, and it became very synth heavy, whereas the season before we had Deadly Dudley Simpson and his mini orchestra. So yeah, I suppose maybe that dates it a little bit, but yeah.
Well, there's like 9 seconds of Paddy Kingsland in this, so I think that's about how much he composed, and then everything else was turned over to the other guy who'd had the flu. Big Paddy Kingsland fan here. I've talked about this in the Full Circle podcast, the Legopolis podcast, and it's a shame that there isn't more in Meglos.
Well, one thing they do in season 18 is they really do more than arguably the Key to Time certainly did this, but they more than you're used to in Doctor Who, they're stringing the episodes together.
Yes.
And this one obviously calls back to the Leisure Hive where K9 went for a swim.
Yes.
And for some reason he detonates on contact with seawater. Interesting design. Okay, 50th century. Not a lot of salt water in the 50th century, I guess. And then so they're fixing him here, and it's actually like a plot point. So they fix him, but his battery only lasts 2 hours now, at least in this story. So
that's right.
This is sort of a convenient way to sideline him when he's too convenient a plot point, right? Because if K9 can always just come in and like shoot up the bad guys, like you don't really have much of a story, right? So he just sort of has to conveniently run out of power.
Had it in for K9 as soon as he took over. And I believe that Bill Fraser, who played General Grugger, insisted on being able to kick K9, and that would be the clincher to him taking the part.
That was the story that the tabloids got a hold of. I'm not sure that it necessarily checks out, but it sounds like this kind of thing he would say.
It makes good headlines.
Yeah. Bill Fraser never has a man sort of been taken out of time more in terms of looking back on this now, when I don't think anyone really remembers Bill Fraser's great comedy career that he had before this. Fun Doctor Who related fact: he replaced William Hartnell on was it the Army Game? That was a series in the 50s. Yeah. So that's his derivation, and you can tell that he's sort of just itching to play this as a comedy bit, but he can't find the comedy.
Yeah, again, it's one of those things. They seem like they want to go to almost like a Rosencrantz and Guildenstern thing with Grugger and Brodadak. Yeah, well, then that's funny. There's another sort of behind the scenes thing that Brodadak, I guess, is bad actor, an anagram of bad actor, which is like, well, like was the actor in on that? I mean,
he was brought in on it, so it was that the writers thought that they would throw that in as a jape because they figured that was the kind of role that you put a bad actor in, and apparently they took Frederick Treves, is it, who played him, out for a drink at some point and said, "Oh, hey, this is why he's called Brodadak," and he thought, "Oh, that's great." We don't know how many pints in he was at this point. But he certainly, if he took from that he should be a bad actor, then bravo, sir, full marks, because you achieved what you set out to do. There, my goodness, he's terrible. And they
So
did not make a comedy duo.
For the bad guys, I think, these mercenaries, the script's really confused, and I think it has a lot to do with the padding, because the Grugger seems like he's supposed to be competent. He seems like he wants to take control of Meglos' super weapon, and he has these designs to do that. And at parts of the script, it's like, oh, okay, so this guy's sort of more the in charge type person. And then there's the bit in episode 3 where Romana just makes fools out of them.
Yeah.
And the padding is so clear, the writing is so bad, and they just end up being absolute idiots that at that point, I couldn't take them seriously anymore. It's just like, what the hell?
You were asking earlier if there was anything I'd noticed this time. There is actually something that's just come to mind now, where I was thinking, oh, hang on a minute. So when they bump into Romana, there seems to be a moment there where they don't know who she is, whereas they've been watching her on the screen in the chronic hysteresis with Tom not that long before.
Good point.
Oh, right.
Admittedly, she's wearing a different outfit from what she had on, but she's, it's not like
she's not Sailor Moon anymore.
She's the one who's basically doing robot dog porn by waggling Canine's tail over and over. My goodness, never thought I'd see so much tail waggling on a robot dog.
I'm just imagining a room full of robot dogs in the dark watching.
Well, you guys have never looked at robot dog porn. Come on. I know you have. You don't have to say it. I'll just take that silence as consent. Yes, it's so weird. I mean, can you imagine Jacqueline Hill being brought into all this? And they're like, she's like, oh, I've been in Doctor Who since 1965. What's this story about? And they're about, it's about the Aztecs and human sacrifice. And she's like, oh, I can do that. But yeah, they're space pirates, and you're actually committing the sacrifice this time around. Have fun. What must she have thought of this? I mean, first of all, can we just toot our own horn and say how wild it is that the randomizer brought us here? I know we're going to talk about it later, but I cannot get over it. Aztecs, human sacrifice, Jacqueline freaking Hill.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten that. I'd forgotten that about Meglos at all. I mean, I knew she was in it, and I kept looking for her. I actually didn't recognize her at first. So,
well, it's funny. My daughter did. She was like right away, like, wait a minute, I've seen her before. Like, she didn't quite place it, but then she said, oh, she looks like Barbara. So, like, it took her a minute, but it was like that. And I said, same actress, and she was like, oh yeah. So she was very pleased. She really liked that it starred someone that she knew.
Full marks to her, but that sort of increases the pressure on the script to be like, why did you take someone who looked like Barbara, who the Doctor would surely recognize when he's being held down and sacrificed by her?
Yeah, you'd think. I think she's great in it. I mean, she does a really good job, and I just love the imagery that, like, this former companion is the one that's about to kill the Doctor.
Yeah,
like there's again more. There's fun to be had here if they would just indulge themselves a little more in it, right? And
I mean, imagine if that were actually Barbara, that she'd sort of gone off. Had more adventures, determined to wipe out human sacrifice in the galaxy, but due to some accidental mishap somewhere down the line, something in her brain gets twisted. She's now in favor of human sacrifice, and here she is. And the Doctor could be like, Barbara, no, it's me.
Well, then it'd be funny because she doesn't know anything about regeneration, right? So then you'd have a whole back and forth about that.
They do say your politics change as you get older, but anyway.
Barbara became the thing she hated.
Yeah.
It's what happens. Watch out, school teachers.
Really keep me interested and make me enjoy this are Jackie Hill. I think she's great. Mm-hmm. And Tom's commitment, because I find, particularly with season 18, whether it's because he's getting a bit grumpy because he's being told to cut down on the humor, whether it's that he's obviously aware by this point that he's not going to be Doctor Who anymore after this season. So it's going to be understandably a bit prickly.
Hey.
By all accounts.
Hey.
Didn't realize I did that.
Unintentional or?
No. I'm not that smart. And then, you've got... he really goes for it, I feel, in this. You've got there's still that warmth from the Doctor, and I do feel there are perhaps a few more comedic moments in this compared to a lot of the other season 18 stories. But when he's playing Meglos, he's going for it 100%. I love the way he plays him. I think he's great.
Yeah, and you don't confuse them that much, although it is a bit confusing at the end where we have them dressed almost exactly the same, and it's not, you can't immediately remember who's who, but that's kind of the fault of the editing at the end, I think.
And I would say you're right on his performance, like right up until episode 4, where the line between Meglos and the Doctor starts to get a little blurry. There are a couple moments when he is Meglos and he sounds a little doctorish.
Yeah.
There's at least one line, I forget what it is, but he's sort of in the ship there, I think with Brodadak and stuff. And he says something like, oh, I think this will, he holds up the dodecahedron, I think this will replace the odd torn jacket. It's a little bit like, it doesn't sound like the way Meglos would say that. No, you're right. I mean, earlier, like when, just his announcement to, I forget the Tygellen, but he's basically got her cornered and he just screams his name at her. That's really good. Even the stuff earlier when he's pretending to be the Doctor, he's very believably like, kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm the Doctor, and I kind of say things like this, and this is what Time Lords do, right? Like, and again, this is like they haven't seen the Doctor in 50 years. Apparently, they don't know what this guy acts like. So why not?
He can do it in a line where he's talking to what's the guy who's chummy with him who invites
Zaster.
He's talking to Zaster. First of all, he doesn't recognize him, so that's a bit of a giveaway. But he said, "Oh, older and wiser, Doctor. Definitely wiser." And you can tell just from that look, you ain't the Doctor, and that's just great. That really sells it to me.
That was great. I also loved the where he has to swallow his pride at praising Ty.
Oh yeah, that
which
look.
That's
He's
nice bit of
just going to break, but no, he halted in.
Nice bit of world building, and that's literally the only thing I'm going to say in Meglos that has that could be described as a nice bit of world building. It really is just, it abandons so many ideas and concepts that someone was asleep at the switch here. And I will say that Bidmead, I'm sort of pointing the finger at Bidmead for the problems here, because he invented that whole Romana leading those guys in a loop and making them dumb thing, and because he inserted the whole coat joke. That was him. He thought that was funny.
I don't want to slam Bidmead too much. I do like him as a writer most of the time. Like if it's his story and he has these big scientific concepts and if he takes them seriously and he's very curious and interested. But here where he's just doing like that padding is so bad. I feel like he's a better writer than script editor probably. Because it called for something else. And like, again, taking a step back on, like we talked a bit about Zaster and a bit like the whole Tygellen society thing. I mean, can we talk about that for a minute?
Yes.
Just how it just makes no sense, would never work. So one thing I thought about, maybe no one thinks that, maybe this is just me, but you have these two sides of the society, seemingly equal in size, equal in sort of influence. One's super religious, one's presumably like secular, but scientific certainly. And
really into disco. Sorry.
Well, how do you choose a leader? Like a leader's got to come from one of these sides, does it not?
Is Zaster the leader? I'm not quite sure. He's sort of like the middleman, right?
Yeah.
He's like, now let's everyone just calm down and take a beat. Let's get around the negotiating table here. Religious people, you have valid concerns. But actually, really, they don't. It's the most rubbish basis for a religion I think I've seen in all of Doctor Who. This thing dropped out of the sky. Oh, and there are aliens. Oh, so things exist in the sky. No, this must be a gift from the heavens.
Exactly. Yeah, and so like I feel like the whole two factions leader who is the mediator. I mean, this sort of structure, maybe even more than anything, dates the story. I feel like because you would never do this kind of thing today. This is sort of a classic sort of sci-fi setup of like it's all sort of predetermined to have some kind of dilemma. Whereas like, well, that would just never happen. I mean, like, again, I'm not being super fair by just looking at it back at 2023, particularly, at a certain time in politics in the world where there's often this idea of like, oh, there's two sides, but the leader's always usually one side or the other, right? Like, and then even as much as they might try to mediate, so there's sort of like an inherent distrust of that. Now, again, that Meglos isn't about that, but it did take me out of the show a little bit by like kind of going like, come on.
And it's a fair point.
He does shout out, doesn't he, as he's about to be thrown out into the outside world. He said, "I was always a believer."
I mean,
a bit late in the day to be shouting it, but yeah.
You do raise a good point, Pete, which afflicts a lot of science fiction, which is this. Science fiction seems to think, oh, they're being really smart and clever when they have two opposing sides on a planet.
Right.
And the planet is cleft in two. Well, no, how about three? How about, just for a change, Zaster is like the head of this sort of, he's the Liberal Democrats. He's the one in the middle. He might make a coalition with one or the other. So, they might make jokes about him, but they also have to woo him potentially at some point, right? So that would be interesting to go there. But like, how many Doctor Who religion versus technology stories have we already seen in our random adventure? How many more are in our future? I feel like the randomizer is telling us to prepare for a lot more of these, right? But we have seen the Crotons. It's very Crotons-ish, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
That, yeah.
I think Zaster also drew the short straw and the fashion drawing because he's got that like purple hood. It looks like Little Red Riding Hood, except it's purple.
Yeah, he's wearing a hoodie and then he's got like some other layer on top of it.
I mean,
I sort of feel, They could have just thrown in the idea that the Doctor said, no, I just meant that as a joke. I didn't mean for you to do that for the next 50 years. Pulls his hoodie down. Like, dude, come on.
I'm sure you guys probably saw this when you were doing your research beforehand. The guy playing Zaster was apparently Ian Fleming's first choice to be James Bond.
What?
Oh, wow. I did not see that.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
My goodness. James Bond would have been a lot more conciliatory, I think.
But he got Zaster, though, man. Like, there you go.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's something for you.
Yeah.
I want that martini shaken, not stirred. But it's okay if you want to say, it's whatever's more comfortable for you. Poor Zaster.
So I could pick at other things that the Tygellan society, and one of them is like, that they have laser guns, they have knowledge of the Time Lords, yet they have these plants on the surface are a problem for them for some reason. That's weird.
Gardening skills, don't they? They have
right.
Let it go.
They have to, because at the end the dodecahedron's gone, right? And so they essentially have to go live on the surface now, and they seem very calm about it.
Let's make it quite clear. Like the surface is clearly not as inhospitable as they claim. It's just that they've let the garden overrun. And what do you call people who just stay underground while the garden they're shut-ins, okay? They're that's why they're invested in this internecine squabble. But just get out. It'll do them a world of good. And they'll cut down those deadly bell peppers.
What about everything will be fine. The sort of studio-based jungle? I feel like they did it so much better in season 17 and in Planet of Evil as well.
Yeah, Planet of Evil. That's good. What was season 17's? What was that one?
Creature from the Pit.
Oh yeah,
I haven't seen that one.
Plants.
Yes. Oh, so good.
Oh, well, maybe the randomizer will send us there next on our next jungle adventure.
I'm so sorry.
It did give me. Yes, please give me more. I feast on them. But this jungle didn't really seem to feast on a lot. Those plants. I don't know.
Romana, but it was pretty limp, wasn't it?
She got did the gas tax escape it? They do escape it, right?
Yeah.
So it's not really. I mean, it was very Triffidy. It did give me. I got Triffid vibes from the wrapping the vines around, and for a moment I was scared of the Triffids. In my memory, Pink, did that ever?
The fungoids from
the fungoids.
Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking. As when they attacked them, all I could hear was a Dalek in the background screaming, "Hostile plant life, destroy, destroy."
Did you guys know? By the way, we were talking about Meglos maybe coming back in the Lodger, and that the reason that it wasn't is because they would look too similar to the creatures in the End of Time, the name of which I cannot remember.
The Vin Volstagg.
Starts with Yes.
Oh,
Thank you.
okay.
Because of those, thanks, Russell T. Davies. You stopped the return of Meglos.
See,
You just made them red like Banacafalata.
Exactly. They are a related species, I believe.
Yeah.
We need more Meglos in our lives, man. I want to know what's the deal. Like, the thing is, could he have survived? I feel like he could have, because he's like a bunch of different things. Like, the whole planet blew up, I guess. But is he light? Maybe he's just light. Like, can he just beamed himself somewhere? Who knows? Yeah,
well, and they say that he's on some sort of weird spectrum of light, but then he sort of shuffles away like the creature in Ark in Space. I don't know what that was about. It was like a pizza shuffling along the floor. That's not exactly.
It's also, why didn't they just grab a bucket or something and slam it over him? It's all right, cool.
Got him. Now we can find out what the hell this creature is about. And do they specifically need Earthlings?
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah. Can't just
it really goes out of his way.
Like
that was the most Douglas Adams-esque moments. That there's sort of you have Arthur Dent with the personality sucked out, basically.
Yeah.
He seemed like a sort of third-rate bank manager.
Yeah. And then he says he'd rather not go back because he told his wife he'd only be 20 minutes.
Yeah, like he was much better when he was fighting Meglos. Like, there you have a little bit of respect for him, even though he has virtually no lines and he's just like kind of this, superimposed image that's trying to push out. You're like, you got respect for the guy. He's like, all right, he's really pushing back here. And then he just has this horrible joke at the end. Like, what a bizarre way to end it. Like, it's just
and also you can understand turning into a cactus, but you can't understand time travel. Come on. Come on, sir. I feel like your 19th century reading needs to progress a little bit onto the time machine from Franz Kafka. Anyway, no, it's so weird. And you can imagine the actor on set, whose name is Christopher Owen. I remember that odd little fact for some reason. And he just sort of, you can imagine him on set going, what's my motivation? Asking the director, like, what is my motivation for this scene? I'm trying to struggle against Tom Baker, like in the sort of classic, I'm escaping from you pose as a ghost. And he just, what is my motivation? Oh, well, your wife said you were going to be 20 minutes late. Or said, don't be more than 20 minutes. Life is not worthing.
I'm going to spoil stuff for people not listening on YouTube or watching on YouTube, that Mark had to jump out for a second, and I'm not sure if this is you, Mark, or is this a cactus impersonating you now, because I'm a little weirded out.
That was so fantastic. I had to go into a time loop to cover for you. I'm afraid, Mark. I think I repeated the same sentence 3 times, but I got out of it.
Work out how to use a cat flap, so I had to physically.
Not one of the cheetah people, obviously.
Yeah, no, she's high maintenance.
Had she seen a cactus or something? Because I know there's the thing about cats, when they see cacti, they kind of get freaked out.
Yeah, and cucumbers as well, apparently.
All right, guys, I have to zero in on one line in this serial, which I hold up with "No, not the mind probe" as one of the most so bad it's good lines in the whole series. It's like when Romana goes, she almost turns to camera when it's like episode 4, like, what's on Zolfathura? Oh, nothing. No, just the screens. Screens. And she goes, the screens of Zolfathura. Just
yes.
Like, it's funny because, like, I mean, I think they believe they sort of set it up plot-wise in episode 1. But, I mean, I also have to think back to, like, I guess this is 1980. And, like, this would have been 3 or 4 weeks ago. And it just seems like crazy out of nowhere knowledge on the part of Romana that she just kind of like, oh yeah, nothing to worry about except the one thing this planet's known for. It could be a problem, It's like, when's that flaming meteor? Where's it going to land? Oh, no, don't worry about it. It's just the other side of town, where there's a gasoline factory.
The screens! You know what? I thought you were going to go for the Protodax yelling at Romana about killing her.
Yeah.
What is it?
Too much.
I think he says "muts." She's seen too much. Kill her. And that's the cliffhanger, right? Oh no, is Romana going to get out of being randomly shot? Yes.
Yeah, I think if if they had leaned more into the fever dream of this and just decided to go full bonkers with it, it would have been a classic, right? And that line, like the Mind Probe line, would have been in the who canon. For me, it's just personally, it's a thing I just look forward to when I watch Meglos. Oh, here comes the line, and then and Baker says it right after her again, but it's like, come on, man, she just stole your thunder. Don't even try. She got it.
Yes, the screens of Zolfazira.
Well, Tom. Podcast called The Mind Probe, and we use that clip.
I would expect nothing less.
So if we ever decide to change it up, we'll have to go with the screens of Zolfazira.
It does feel like a segment that we need for the video side of our podcast, Pete. We're going to show you some screens now.
Another way of voting on how much you enjoyed a show, because you've only got 12 now.
Yeah, this was a screen of Zolfazira for me. I'm not exactly sure what it means, but sounded portentous at the time. Yeah, exactly.
Gentlemen, our 7th rating.
Well, we're not up to there yet, but I do want to plant a seed, as it were, of saying that this may be for you and me, Mark, potentially our fixed point in time, because we are so nostalgic about season 18. So I don't want to skew your rating in any way. I might not myself rate it thus, but I just wanted to throw that in there for a little bit of dramatic tension.
I do wonder whether my reminiscing about that particular era might slightly cloud my judgment on this one.
Cloud your judgment, he said, wearing a season 18 scarf. Boy, that's nonsense. Yeah. I may just take that out. We have to pass on this because it is so much bonkers fun. And it could have been more bonkers fun if Chris Bidby had taken all of that overrunning time and used it to kind of just explain things a little bit more.
Well, I think also even if they didn't go full on into the fun, they could have at least made episode 4 much better with just a couple of changes, I think, because it's like they do the whole thing at the end where it's like, okay, is it the Doctor, is it Meglos, they're misleading each other? That's fun, but I feel like that was leading up to a scene that they almost do but they don't follow through with, which is like who's who, and it's literally it's who's who for literally like a second, because Romana comes into where they both are and it's like, oh my. And then Meglos just completely takes the mask off immediately. He's like, get out of my way. Like, okay, you're Meglos. Got it.
Just for one moment, I don't know if you saw it, but just for one moment, there is what now has to be, and I think we should use the Pull to Open Twitter account for this purpose. This has to be the most memeable Doctor Who moment, because it's basically the Spider-Man meme, where they're pointing at each other. Like, we got to do like that, but the Doctor Who version, and it's this. It's like a screenshot from Meglos. Who knew?
I mean, before he says, get out of my way, he does stare right through her. And you could be forgiven for thinking, well, yeah, that is Tom for a lot of season 18.
That's him. Officer, that's the man.
Until the second half where he couldn't even look at her, I guess.
Yeah.
For a little bit there. But you kind of want one of those scenes, like the thing that immediately comes to mind, there's an old episode of the original Star Trek. It's called Whom Gods Destroy. And basically, there's a guy who can shapeshift, and he shapeshifts into Captain Kirk. And there's this bit where Spock opens the door to the room, and then there's 2 Kirks in there, and they're both claimed to be the original. And then it's like, all right, well, I'll try to figure this out by asking them questions. I'm gonna maybe wait around for one of them to do stuff, and then the big fight ensues. Of course, a big Star Trek fight between them. I mean, it's like this is how you do the scene, right? Like, and I feel this is what, I don't know, 13 years later. Like, maybe they forgot. I don't know. So much potential wasted there.
It's not our first doppelganger, and we've had the Enemy of the World, and before
that,
we had the Massacre as well.
Indeed, and I like that the Doctor has that line about, what we've got here is a good old-fashioned doppelganger, because of course it is good old-fashioned to him. He's had one for every regeneration except Pertwee, right? And would have one again in Arc of Infinity, which we've also been to recently.
Yeah, I don't know if Colin Baker ever gets one, does he? I don't think so. Maybe in Big Finish somewhere.
His name is Sylvester McCoy. and it appears right at the start of Time in the Running.
He gets
It's
an
uncanny.
impersonator. There's an impersonator in Big Finish, if you've ever listened to The One Doctor.
Yes.
Which is quite a good a fun episode. There's funds, by the way, folks, if you like fun fan service. But another thing they could have done in episode 4 is that they seem to set this up. Like Meglos turns into the blob, he goes back into the cactus, and then does nothing. Like he's just kind of like, they could have done a little bit more with that, and Grugger and wrestling for control of the facility somehow. Yeah. Yet he's just kind of back. And why'd you do that if you weren't going to do anything with it?
Yeah, I mean, there is so much that Big Finish could clear up here if anyone actually cared. But yeah, we could have a whole Big Finish on who the Earthling is, and his whole backstory, and something about the end of Zolfathura. I mean, it's kind of crying out for that. But like, yeah, none of these strands, all these strands are too spiky to touch, even for Big Finish. All right.
Well, those strands are leading to questions, of course. Though we've answered and asked many, we have to answer a few more. And those are, of course, the 4 questions to Doomsday. First question. Why did the randomizer take us here? No idea.
On the whole human sacrifice thing, I think it was just, messing with us and just saying, you made such a big deal about it last time. Well, we're gonna skip an episode and then bring you back there again.
Yeah, well, it's very randomizer-like behavior to take us to right before Full Circle after we've seen Full Circle fairly recently. So that checks out. But I am a little worried about the human sacrifice angle, because we said it last week in Kablam that there's kind of a human sacrifice angle to that too. That's what Kablam is becoming sentient and essentially performing a human sacrifice of Kira to let her lover Charlie know how much it hurts what he's going to do. So, but nevertheless, it's a human sacrifice. So is the randomizer trying to sacrifice us, Pete? I mean, and should we continue this conversation in the pod bay, perhaps? Yeah. Oh no, the randomizer can read lips.
Chris, don't look above you. There's no stone that I'm about to cut the ropes of, or I guess you have to use the torch, right?
That's exactly.
Start singing Daisy Daisy, then you know.
Yes, and that's why it's slowed down at the end of episode 4. Okay.
So we talked about the exclamation point title, and this one deserving it. The sacrifice thing for sure with the Aztecs. But honestly, Mark, it's funny. As we were talking, I realized you did it. You were coming because you on your podcast just did the Enemy of the World.
We did.
Yes,
which was a doppelganger episode, and so the randomizer knew our podcasts were going to intersect.
That's it.
And I said, "You got to do Meglos."
Absolutely.
I feel satisfied about the narrative structure of this episode of Pull to Open now, because I noticed that at the beginning. I was like, "Ooh, is that a reason? Is that a connection? Fantastic!" And now we've brought it up again at the end. Good job, Pete.
Okay, sure you did notice it at the beginning after I said it.
I was like,
Doctor, I said the screens.
Well, yes. No, look, I'm spoiler alert, I'm going to be asking the randomizer for another doppelganger episode. But
okay, wow.
So I remembered the names of all of them.
Hold on. You're taking everything out of order here. It's too timey-wimey.
We're in a time loop. Chronic hysteresis.
Hysteresis all over again.
It's time, though, guys, for the second question. We're only on the second question, which is, what if the evil plot had succeeded?
Okay. So, whose plot?
Well, I'm guessing it's going to be Meglos' plot to destroy Tygella. At least they wouldn't have to worry about tidying up the garden, because that would be gone.
But it was actually technically Grugger's decision to attack Tygella.
That's true.
So, anyway.
He's so mad at Tygella just because he lost 3 people or something like that? Was that the reason? Like, he just seems so mad all of a sudden. Tygella. All right, chill out, dude. You're a mercenary. Like, you lose people sometimes.
I think what it is, Meglos wants to destroy Tygella, and he's just kind of giving it the responsibility to the two idiots.
Yes.
They kind of plant it in their minds. I mean, they've just come from a planet. Name a planet, any planet you like.
Perhaps the one in which that pretty girl pulled the wool over your eyes by selling you some bunkum about the rotation of the planet.
She's not Tagella now.
You didn't know that? Anyway.
Well, okay, so let's presume there's things like what I like to do in these is presume the thing that is closest to the climax that prevents the climax for the bad guy doesn't happen. So in other words, the Doctor is discovered earlier before he can do anything with the screens and realign them to destroy Zulfathura. So that doesn't happen. He's thrown in prison, and then Meglos is thrown in prison, so they're together there. But Grugger's in control of this thing and does destroy Tagella. And then I guess Romana and K9 are still free, but do they basically is Grugger more competent here and capture them, kill them? And is he then this amazing cosmic conqueror all of a sudden? And they're like, whoa, this mercenary dude is fun. Now he's like basically, peoples of the universe, please attend carefully.
Yes, he does. Yeah. He does look a bit Genghis Khan-ish. Which
the hat from the Graph in Decay.
Oh,
that's right. I knew that looked familiar.
Yeah, there was for a hot second. They were going to make these actors look East Asian. They were going to suggest that that's what the Aztecs were. Aztecs. Yeah, my goodness. Thank goodness we didn't have to talk about that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, if they could have done it top to bottom, you know what I mean? Like if even Grugger and Brodadak were like, it was just sort of like an Asian gang. Actually, that's not good. Never mind.
No. We talked about this in the Talons of Wenchang. Anyway, no. So you like to take it to the last possible point, Pete, and I always like to take it to the most dramatic point, which I think would be that rock going splat on the Doctor. Now,
that's fair.
We haven't definitively answered this question of would that kill a Time Lord? You've got to presume so.
Yeah, I'd say so.
It'd be a lot thinner if he survived.
Well, especially in Classic Who, where Time Lords are dying left and right in Classic Who.
Yeah. Not Tom.
That's
7
That's
years.
right. If only whoever did the scheme in the Impossible Astronaut season had thought to just stick Matt Smith under a large block of granite, killed him that way. There'd be no surviving that Tesselector or not, no surviving. So okay, so the Doctor's dead. what an end dead. At the hands of Barbara. What an end to Doctor Who.
Yeah. Shock.
So Romana is traumatized and she goes back to the TARDIS, and then does she try to then sort of figure out what happened and stop Meglos? Or does Meglos just win?
Because I like to think in this scenario that Lexa does not actually die randomly in some stupid, pointless sacrifice that JNT insisted on setting.
Well, again, it's because, not to harp on the padding and all the opportunities, but apparently there was no scene. Like, in other words, she just kind of you just didn't see the character again. They're like, oh no, we should have some end to the character. Well, just write a better end.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, there's a lot of asleep at the switch here, but yeah, I got to assume that like everyone else in this plot is so lazy and so incompetent, Meglos included, that you've got to figure that sooner or later Romana and K9 and Lexa would get around to it, and then it's the three of them adventuring in the TARDIS, ignoring the summons to Gallifrey. Wow. Yeah, not even ending up in E-space. Just
I was just going to say, full circle looks a lot different now.
Exactly. There is no full circle. There's no E-space. Because if you don't go back to Gallifrey, no Adric.
What a shame.
But wait a minute. If Meglos, this is the thing though, if Meglos, you're presuming he's incompetent, he and Grugger fight it out, does Zulfathura get destroyed? Because this is important, because if Zulfathura is not destroyed, there is a super weapon waiting for anyone to grab anytime, whether it's the Master, whether it's the Daleks, whomever. And I think that planet has to get annihilated, and with the dodecahedron, because otherwise, it's a honeypot.
But apparently all you have to do to outfox anyone who's actually going to use it as a super weapon is to get them to hold up one of the screens. Pretend like it's very heavy. Get them to hold it up like Tom Baker does with the guard. And that's how you get around it. Yeah, I somehow don't see this evil plot being at all competent or thought out. And, in the spirit of the script of Meglos, were it to succeed, there would be some last-minute rescue in a very confusing manner.
No, that's fair. Alrighty. All right. I think we've had a conclusion of sorts there. Like the Unbound series that we just came up with.
That's right.
Ramona and Lexa.
Yeah, and that's where Lexa takes off her hat. She's like, "Oh, thank goodness!" And she shakes her head. Barbara. It was all a plan to get the TARDIS.
Oh, now you're talking about Lexa's hat. This plays into what I was thinking of for the next.
The
next question, which of course is, where is the Clara Splinter?
So she's used Meglos's shrinky doodad, and she's actually inside Lexa's hat because it's massive.
Oh,
in there the whole time.
She's directing Lexa. She's the voice of Ty.
Massive beehive of Jacqueline Hills, and she's directing her. And...
Wow! Yes, because she doesn't want the Doctor to notice it's Barbara.
Exactly.
So she's got to control her, and the only way to do it is from under the hat. I like it.
It all makes sense to me.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking that maybe she is the voice behind the recording in the temple where they're just singing. Yeah, it's like that weird vocoder voice, thanks to Ty or something.
Again, very 80s.
She might have her finger on the crackly audio sting whenever we see Meglos. Maybe that's her thing. But I thought that there's a continuity error where the Doctor says he never saw the dodecahedron the first time around, and then he says later he did see it. So what I was thinking is that she's a Tygellen who sent essentially the Doctor photos of the dodecahedron. Maybe it was even part of the message, the call for help.
And to be fair,
like, we need you to fix.
Wigs, you're not going to notice quite so much, are you? That it's her.
Yeah, totally. And what it does is it causes the Doctor kind of misremember. Maybe I did see it the last time I was there, and so he's a little confused on whether he's seen it or not. And so, it's a little more confusion for a confusing episode. It could never have too much.
Rule number 1: the Doctor lies about stories that he's read on a postcard and makes them his own.
Alrighty, folks. It's time to move on to the final question, the ultimate question, the only question that matters for Meglos. What did we think of this episode? The Pull to Open rating system has 6 ratings. There's the Dalek, which we give to a good episode of Doctor Who. The Ogron, which we give to a not so good episode of Doctor Who. The Professor Hater, which we give to a not so good episode, but hey, at least we learned something. At least they tried something. The Viscount Banger, which we reserve for the best of the best. Okay, we're at 4 now. This is Point in Time, which means it's an episode beyond rating. We can't rate it sometimes for reasons of nostalgia, but occasionally for other reasons. And of course, the Lady Cassandra, which is Doctor Who best thought of as wallpaper, something that you want to essentially have on with the sound off, maybe as set decoration or something to have at a party.
And we should definitely mention, as we should in all Lala Ward episodes, that the Viscount Banger was, of course, named for her dad. Yes. So for your consideration, members of the Academy, here is Viscount Banger's daughter. Does this deserve a Viscount Banger? What say you, gentlemen?
Well, why don't we save Mark's for last? He can do a tiebreaker if it needed.
Yes.
So
praise be to tiebreaker.
I'll go out and I just got that. Just like I just got that your name being a palindrome. That's like I got
Hey.
But okay, so this, like we said lots of times, this story actually looks great. There's really cool visuals. I mean, that really definitive, iconic, really image of Tom Baker with the pricks That came out wrong.
Who doesn't remember that publicity photo?
Oh my God.
Videos again. Yeah.
Taking it for a happy night at the Coach of Horses. Yes.
You got Jackie Hill as Lexa. You have the 12-sided die ruling the society. I mean, it's just bonkers. But I want to keep the sound off on Meglos. This is a Lady Cassandra top to bottom. That's what this is.
Yes! You gave it a Lady Cassandra. I was hoping someone would, because not only for all the reasons that you mentioned, but also that's what Tom Baker would look like if the boulder had actually flattened him.
Yes.
Turns out that's how Time Lords survive. That's actually what Lady Cassandra is. There was just a big human sacrifice accident. But yes, a big part of me was going to go for Lady Cassandra myself. That was going to be my second option. I think since you haven't given it, I must opt for what is truly in my heart when I think of Meglos, which is the wonder of season 18. And I got to give a shout out, by the way, to Tom Baker, which we haven't even mentioned it so far. He's the only person in history to have been in Madame Tussauds twice.
Yes.
And it's because of Meglos. It's the him and the Meglos version. And the Meglos version, weirdly, they didn't sculpt it with like bits missing under the glove, bits of Tom Baker's skin under the glove. It's strange that they didn't do that. But it was actually only in the publicity photos that happened, right? Like I remember seeing those at the time. Going, that's weird. Is that a glove? But you don't actually see that in the show. So good job for them for doing that. But yeah, because of all of that, because this was so early in my fandom, and because appropriately enough, it does have a time loop, even if they really should have called it a time loop, but didn't. It made it sound like a made-up ailment for women in the 18th century. Chronic psoriasis. Therefore, we must burn you as a witch. So anyway, that adds the fixed point in timeness. It's a fixed point in time.
Okay, we got one Cassandra, one fixed point in time. Mark, you could tie break or you could do your own thing.
Well, okay. So you have both very ably pointed out all of the many, many problems with Meglos. However, I have an awful lot of fun with this story. I know you're saying they could lean into the funny a bit more, but I just have a ton of fun whenever I watch this. It's one of those things that you can sit down and watch it, and we've done this before. I sat down with a whole bunch of friends many, many moons ago before I even started podcasting, and one of my friends put on The Chase, and there was like, it's a 50-50 split. Half of us were Doctor Who fans, the other half didn't really watch the program. And it was one of those things you could just sit down, let it wash over you, and just have a ton of fun with it. And for me, at least, this falls into that category. So I do feel like I have to kind of redress what is going to be probably... I'm second guessing here what your listeners are going to be voting when they vote on Spotify. But I have the impression that Meglos doesn't necessarily have the greatest of reputations among fans. I could be wrong. And if you love this story, please get in touch with the guys. They'll be delighted to hear from you. But
there are whole societies of Meglos fans underground. Their garden overgrew.
I'm going to give it a Dalek.
Oh, wow. All right. It's a good episode of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Wow.
There we go.
Wow. Okay. I did not see the Dalek coming. Yeah, that's
not many people get a chance to say those words.
Wow. Well, we've been exterminated by that result. It's yes, it's a hybrid. Is it our first three-way hybrid, Pete? I'm not even sure if the Codex can handle such a thing.
I think it might be. I won't do it in real time, but we'll figure it out. I think this might be the first time we have three different. No. Remember the Doctor's wife?
Ah, yes.
Yes, that was a triple hybrid.
Yes, Dave. Yeah, we had a triple hybrid there. It was this one is perhaps more surprising. What an ending. Well, Pete, while you power up the dodecahedron that's connected to the codex, I say that we step back into our time machine and enter a time loop where we ask the randomizer where we're going next.
Oh, before we do that, I want to make sure the Spotify listeners vote now on your rating for Meglos. Mark mentioned it, but I want to make sure this is a good time to remind everyone you can vote in Spotify your rating if you agree with me, Mark, Chris, or you want to do your own thing. This is the time.
Okay, you gave me time to have one more random thought about Meglos before we left it, which is that if Tom Baker and Lala Ward's marriage was already on the scrap heap when they were recording this, as some might suggest, then at least she got to see him have to pretend to trip over. However many times they shot that. And to watch him do it badly and then pretend to do it badly. And there's just so many wonderful layers of revenge to that. So I'm adding that to the pile of Mark's, this was fun to watch. It should be a Dalek. So, all right, let's find out what is going to be fun to watch or otherwise next. Pete, I normally do this explanation of the randomizer. Why don't you give it a try?
Well, the pull to open randomizer consists of two parts. There is the pull to open codex, which I have in front of me right now. That is a complete accounting for every single televised adventure of the television show called Doctor Who. And we hook that into something that is not a 12-sided die.
Right.
It's actually
we took it into a Brownian motion generator to give it a really strong cup of tea, and we plug numbers into random.org, which has true randomness, not like that fly-by-night algorithmic randomness you find on most computers today, but true bespoke randomness based on atmospheric noise, dodecahedrons in the upper atmosphere, and however many cactus spikes have floated up from the Gobi Desert. We will find out the result of that when Pete gives me the number, first of all, of stories that we have remaining. I believe we've hit a 5 milestone.
205, in fact.
Yes! 205. Wow. And this must also bring us close to the 100 stories that we've reviewed, Mark.
Oh, yeah.
And we got to do some special episodes on that, so that's all coming up. But before I hit the generate button, we do like to give the randomizer challenges, suggestions, ideas, requests for further viewing. And Mark, as the reigning champion in this area, I would have to say, although I will say that I feel responsible for asking for bubble wrap last week, and then we got cactus spikes, which is bubble wrap-ish. It's not as bubble wrappy as the Ark in Space, but there we go. Or any of the other bubble wrap hands. Anyway, Mark, where would you like the randomizer to go next?
Well, I'm going to throw a complete spanner in the works because
yes, please.
You've obviously got it planned out exactly where you want it to go. I would like the randomizer to pick a missing episode.
Oh, that's always cool.
Well, that could dovetail with my one that I've already revealed, because I've already revealed as to catch you up, listeners. I request of the randomizer, officially, oh dear randomizer, take us to another doppelganger episode, and the first one was the Reign of Terror. Yes, which is missing and entirely missing.
Yeah, is the one with
the massacre.
Yeah, I think you're thinking of the massacre.
Yeah,
oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Well, lots of people die in the Reign of Terror as well. So.
Yeah. It's all
kind of a doppelganger for the massacre.
Yeah.
Watch the randomizer take us to both of those stories in order.
So mine will be, I actually said it earlier in the podcast, Hostile Plant Life. Let's have it.
Yeah. Bring it
Let's
on.
have the most Triffidish episode that we care to do.
I don't care if it's seeds. I don't care if it's crinoids. I don't care if it's vervoids, oids of any kind. Actually, I'll take.
Gotta love a crinoid.
Love a good void. Yes. All right. Give me a countdown. I'll hit the generate button.
There we go. In 4, 3, 2, 1.
36.
Oh no, there could be a missing episode. It is not a missing episode. Is the ambassadors?
Wow. That I never knew that had an exclamation mark on it too.
Oh, it doesn't. But my goodness, is the point size very high? That was the 1970 version of an exclamation point. They couldn't bring themselves to do
I'm
that.
just going to say this now. R.I.P. Levelator.
Inside podcast baseball there.
Yes, if Peter's sounding very, very quiet throughout the entire podcast, now you know why. Oh my goodness! Wow, the Ambassadors of Death.
You just dodged a bullet, Mark. I realized, because this is a 7-episoder, so you lucked out if you only had 4.
And it also has to be said, I'm not the biggest Pertwee fan.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Interesting.
because he didn't have a doppelganger. Obviously, you were like, forget that guy.
That's solely my reasoning behind it.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been a delight talking about Meglos with you two gentlemen. Mark, before we go, I want people to know where they can find you and your podcast on the internet.
Okay. Well, firstly, thank you both so much for having me on. It's been so much fun. Really.
You're so welcome. It really has.
Did too. So we are called All of Time and Space. My friend Ian and I are watching all of Doctor Who in broadcast order. We have some amazing guests that come along. So the episode that just dropped now has got Toby Haydock looking at the Web of Fear. So yes, we're getting towards the end of the black and white era and the end of
awesome
the Doctor's era as we go. So yeah, not long before we get into Pertwee. Maybe I'll have a reappraisal by the time we get there. So yes, we're on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all those other wonderful places you would look for a podcast.
And if people wanted to find you on Twitter, they would look for...
Yeah, our Twitter is TimeNSpacePod.
Right on.
Find all of our stuff there. We have a fantastic community of listeners who let us know what they think of the stories that we're reviewing, and it's a lot of fun. And we mess around and do silly quizzes, and we just have a laugh, and we don't take it too seriously, but we have a great time doing it.
Nice.
Right. You got to put that.
If you have not subscribed to Mark's podcast, please do. Hey, if you haven't subscribed to this podcast, please do. This has been Pull to Open. It's a podcast. Go ahead, hit a plus sign, a bell icon, whatever you're watching it on, listening it on. There's something to do. Please do that. If you haven't reviewed the podcast yet on your app, go ahead and do that as well. We're available on all those fine apps, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Overcast, Google Podcasts, all the places you find fine podcasts. Thank you, Martin West, for our music, as always. And follow us on the socials, Twitter, Instagram, Threads, Pull to Open 63, and Facebook, and TikTok and Blue Sky. We are Pull to Open. We will see you next time for more deaths from the ambassadors.
We will see you either in 1973 or 1979, depending on your dating controversy position. All right. Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.